So in this part, I will try to share some ideas about open source business models. And so one, as a reminder, this is the way we do open source at Eclipse. So that's really the idea, to build a business-friendly ecosystem based on extensible platforms. I already described this slide 10 minutes ago, so if you have any question on it, we can discuss that at the end of the presentation. But basically, the idea is that everybody needs a platform, and everybody needs a good platform. A good platform is expensive, and it makes sense to work, to collaborate even with direct competitors to create the platform. And on top of the platform, everybody must be able to create product or services on top of the platform. So this presentation is mainly extracted from a deliverable I contributed to some years ago. It was in the context of an ITIA 2 project called OPs, and it was about open source business models for PolarSys, which is one of our working groups. And basically we see that there are several different open source approaches to business models, and here are some examples. So one example is large organizations using open source for collaboration, because you have with open source, you have a clearly established legal framework, you have clearly established processes, and the legal framework, the licenses, the processes, and everything enable good implementation of open innovation, and also they are widely accepted worldwide. So it means that if you start working in open source, then you can be sure that people in India, in the US, in South America, in Europe, understand the concept behind what we presented before, and can contribute and can collaborate in this context. So I list 3 examples here. IBM, when they open sourced Eclipse. So yes, this example is large organizations that create open source extensible platforms. So IBM with Eclipse, Rackspace and NASA with OpenStack, and also to some extent I think that the initiatives, when Bosch joined the IoT working group at Eclipse, so the collaboration that is taking place there is of the same kind. So this is to describe those business models. I use usual Osterwalder business model canvas, and for each business model, I tried to identify 2 or 3 main most important aspects of the business model. So if you want to publish an open source extensible platform, so the goal is really, the value proposition of this business model is publishing a game-changing technology in open source. So I think that when IBM published Eclipse in 2001, that was a game-changing technology, and it was in open source. That was a very good platform for development tools, and the fact that it was in open source was a game-changing factor. I mean, we had a keynote by John Svensson, who was VP of IBM when they open sourced Eclipse, and he told us that okay, it was a huge investment, several hundred million of US dollars, but it was also a big benefit in terms of cutting the cost of having several platforms, and also benefiting from contributions from external committers and stuff like that. And the key resources are an important labs workforce, technology leaders. I mean that Philippe would be able to tell you that without guys like Eric Gama or technology leaders like that, Eclipse would not have been so successful. And also, I think that one key factor for this kind of platform is that the platforms must be extensible. You don't use this business model to create products. And if you look at it, the most successful open source projects are platforms and not products. Next one is the model of the open source foundation. And so as examples, you can have the Eclipse Foundation or the OpenStack Foundation. And what are the key aspects? So the value proposition, I think that you have had some presentations about the value proposition of the Eclipse Foundation. So we have governance, IP, and project management, ecosystem, development of an ecosystem, and also collaboration infrastructure. Key activities is community management, and the revenues come from membership fees and also event registrations. So in open source, we also sometimes observe pure service business models. So typically, we have lots of freelance working in open source ecosystems. They are the experts, they are our rock stars, and they know very well the ecosystem, and they make their living by just providing service because they sell their knowledge of the ecosystem. Also, large service providers like Atos or Capgemini or companies like that, they also use open source, and they have people skills in open source communities, and they can implement this pure service business model. And in large organizations, most of the time there are people acting like in a competency center to help the rest of the large organization work with the open source communities. So here, an important aspect of the value proposition is the expertise, and two very important aspects are having direct channels to the open source communities, and on the other side, contributing to the communities. I mean, there is really a difference between a skilled consultant who knows how to use an open source software, and a skilled consultant who is a contributor or even a committer of an open source project. It really makes the difference, because the committer knows everything about the project. He knows what is the roadmap of the project. He knows the rest of the team, so he can identify very quickly who can help him to solve a bug and stuff like that. Leverage service business model is when you basically you create products on top of an open source ecosystem, and you sell recurring subscription contracts. And here, one of the key activities is product management and quality assurance. And one example that I took the slides from these presentations that Red Hat is giving to their new employees. And I think that what Red Hat is doing is a good example of this kind of leverage service business model. They collaborate in open source. They have tons of contributors upstream. So tons of contributors who are paid full-time to contribute to open source projects and to lead open source projects. And out of this, this open source world represents something like 50,000 packages, and then they create a first filter with Fedora, and Fedora is 5,000 packages, and they have 2 releases per year. But they don't provide any support. They just use it to test the latest technologies and to follow the track of trending technologies. But based on Fedora, they create Red Hat Enterprise Linux by downsizing the ecosystem even more, and they just have 1,500 packages. But here they provide a very stable, mature, certified, and they sell Red Hat Enterprise Linux with support, with all the support, etc. So that's typically all the efforts they have to do to take what the open source community is producing and to put it in a product. So that's one example. I think that you can find other examples, but this one is very illustrative of this leverage services business model. That you have what happens in the community, and on top of what happens in the community, then you create a product and you sell the product. Infrastructure providers also, like GitHub, Amazon, Azure, or Google Cloud, that those guys use tons of open source projects, and they use it to create a product that they sell with during a subscription. Their value proposition is to put together an integrated infrastructure. One of the key activities is to develop this infrastructure on top of open source software. And also they have tons of evangelists who go through conferences and potential customers to sell the infrastructure. And another open source business model is, okay, the software is free, but we sell hardware that works better because works better with this software. So it typically fits well with IoT. That's something that we see is done by Eurotech to some extent. I mean, Eurotech is doing Cura, and Cura is open source, but they also sell industrial IoT gateways that embed Cura in an hardware package with additional modules and stuff like that. So here, the revenue stream comes from selling the hardware, and I think that the main channels is okay. With internet, you will reach out to hobbyists who will use your software on platforms like Raspberry Pi or stuff like that, and they will give you feedback. They will ask for improvement and stuff like that. And here, again, the key activity is to be able to develop a product on top of open source software. So, the idea is that open source is not a silver bullet. And to some extent, open source doesn't determine your business model so much. That's an enabler. That's a good way to promote or establish standards. That's a powerful marketing channel because you give everybody the right to use a base technology. And that's also a powerful ticket to collaboration because, and I know that most of you have certainly been confronted with the joy of reading a project consortium agreement for project. And if you think about it, I don't know any project consortium agreement of less than 40 pages to establish how to collaborate on a 3-year project. But I know tons of open source projects that collaborate very well with based on the contract, which is a license of 2 pages. So that's a powerful ticket to collaboration. And well, I think that this will be repetitions with what you already saw, but when you want to do open source, it's very important to manage intellectual property from the beginning. Because open source is one way to manage intellectual property. As we have seen in the previous presentation, that's typically the same law than for other distribution means. You should not do open source alone because it's not so interesting. Don't reinvent the wheel because lots of components already exist that can help you. And choose a business-friendly license. I mean, my advice to people that I meet is, okay, maybe you think that Apache is a better license for you. My opinion is that Eclipse public license is a very good license because you have the reciprocity on the code, but you can use it in products. But if you want to create a platform in open source, I think that GPL may not be the best license. So BSD, Apache, MIT, Eclipse public license are certainly a better choice because they are more business friendly. And that's all for this short presentation. But I hope you have questions.
Thanks a lot, Gael. Any questions for Gael?
So I know that there are certainly other kind of presentations of business models that should be considered. And I will be happy if during your project you think about it and you describe, you document other business models. I will be happy to discuss if how it's different from the business models I documented here.
Yeah, I agree with Gael. It's very important, guys, for you. If some of SMEs who don't feel very comfortable with giving up their code, and they need to find a good business model to survive or to really take advantage of this kind of project, just talk with us. Ralph, Gael, they have strong expertise, and they already talk with several different organizations who are making business on open source for years. So they will be happy to help you finding the best match for your business.
Yep.
No more questions?
Maybe.
No. Okay.
One reaction is that from a software handling perspective, I think at least for SME companies, those SMEs, those product handling, software handling principles and product structures are more important. In bigger or large companies, you have used to have handled the product structure, the code you have produced. But now, at least in our company, we have been struggling last 10 years that we have to exactly know what kind of open source component we are including in our platform, so whatever the part is called, but also maintain that. And our customers are requesting strongly that we know exactly what we have been included.
Yeah.
There are in different cultures, there are even different kind of principles that what kind of extra software can be included. And in some cases, they are just strictly demanded that you have to harden all extra additional code when using the Linux-based software. And on the other hand, we have to have strict principles and policies about the kind of software vulnerabilities also, that we monitor all those threats all the time, and then we react as soon as possible and even inform the customer about those.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a little bit different flavor in software handling when doing all in-house compared that we are having the open source components in software.
Yeah. Now, go ahead, Gael.
So I agree that most of the companies should manage their software bill of material, and that license compatibility is an issue and stuff like that. At Eclipse, we have a new project on this topic called Software 360 by and Bosch is also participating to this project. And I think that that's typically an interesting project to help manage the bill of material. But I think that anyway you have to use existing projects. I mean, you can't do everything internally, because in terms of time to market, it would not be efficient.
And I was mentioning yesterday this triad of researchers, industries, and SMEs, and now we see more and more situations where actually big industries ask to subcontractors to do some development for them, but to open source this development just to be sure that if these guys bankrupt or they are bought by somebody else, by, for example, competitor, then the code will not go to the competitor and will stay available for somebody else. So it's also a way of learning and working in this domain. It's also important for this small organization to know how to do development in open source. Okay, we have 15 minutes, I think, before having the presentation from